The truth behind the name, Paris Xan's DNA revelation. For years, one question refused to die quietly. It lived in tabloid headlines, in hushed conversations among fans, and in the spaces between every rare photograph of a girl who looked different from the family whose name she carried. Paris Jackson, daughter of the most famous entertainer who ever lived, grew up under the weight of a mystery she never asked for. And in early 2025, she chose to end it, not for the world, but for herself. The question of Paris Jackson's biological origins is not simply a celebrity gossip story. It is a story about identity, about the courage it takes to seek truth, and about what love really means when stripped of every expectation society places on it. It is a story that forces us to ask a harder, more important question than who her biological father is. What makes someone a father at all? The unspoken question. From the very beginning, something quietly unsettled the public's understanding of Michael Jackson's family. When Paris and her brothers appeared in rare public moments, their faces were hidden behind masks and veils, shielded from the world by a father who wanted desperately to protect them. That protection, rooted entirely in love, had an unintended consequence. It made people wonder what was being hidden and why. As Paris grew older and began to appear publicly on her own terms, the questions that always existed in the background grew louder. Her fair skin, light brown hair, and blue eyes stood apart from the Jackson family's well-known appearance. And the media, ever hungry for something to examine, latched onto those differences. Journalists speculated. Fan forums debated endlessly. Wild theories about surrogacy, sperm donors, and secret arrangements began circulating, each one feeding off the absence of any official clarification. Michael Jackson himself had always been notoriously private when it came to his children. He considered fatherhood to be the greatest achievement of his life, a sentiment he expressed with genuine emotion in interviews. Yet he consistently refused to offer the public any window into the details of how his family came to be. Friends and close associates, aware of the private truths behind the scenes, respected his wishes and said nothing. Without any authoritative voice to cut through the noise, the rumors grew more elaborate with each passing year, and the truth became harder to find beneath the layers of speculation. The contrast between what the public believed and what Paris herself was living created a silence that lasted for more than 2 decades. That silence, heavy and unresolved, became its own kind of story, one that could only truly end when Paris herself decided to tell it. A fatherhood built in silence. Michael Jackson married Debbie Rowe in 1996, a modest ceremony in Sydney that seemed to signal his desire for a quieter chapter away from the relentless machinery of global fame. Debbie was a dermatology nurse at the clinic of Dr. Arnold Klein, a trusted figure in Michael's personal life, and their relationship had grown through years of professional contact into something deeper and more meaningful. For Michael, the marriage represented not just companionship, but the beginning of the family he had always longed for. Paris Michael Catherine Jackson was born in California, legally recognized as Michael's daughter from her very first day. Michael described fatherhood with a sincerity that went beyond the usual celebrity performance. He spoke about his children with a warmth that seemed to come from somewhere genuinely personal. "I love my children with all my heart," he said in a 1997 interview. "It's what I've always dreamed of." Those who knew him well confirmed that this was not a performance. Behind the gates of Neverland Ranch, Michael was present, attentive, and deeply involved in every aspect of Paris and her brother Prince's childhood. The children were homeschooled, kept away from the cameras, surrounded by a carefully selected circle of trusted adults. Michael organized their education, oversaw their medical needs, and made deliberate choices to ensure that their psychological well-being was protected from the pressures that had shaped and in many ways damaged his own childhood. Neverland was not simply a home. It was an act of love made into architecture. It was his attempt to give his children the peaceful, protected childhood he had never had himself. Debbie Rowe later spoke about the nature of their arrangement with characteristic directness. She explained that Michael longed to be a father more than almost anything else in his life, and that she had wanted to help him achieve that dream. Their marriage eventually ended, but Michael retained full parental rights, and he continued to raise Paris and her siblings with the same fierce dedication he had shown from the beginning. To those who watched him parent, there was never any question about the depth of his commitment. Whatever the biological realities might have been, Michael Jackson was, in every meaningful sense, present, Public image and media scrutiny. When Paris began stepping into the public eye as a young adult, the media's focus sharpened quickly and uncomfortably. The same features that had previously been mentioned in whispers were now examined openly. Her appearance became a subject of public commentary in a way that would have felt intrusive to anyone, let alone a young woman who had grown up specifically to avoid this kind of scrutiny. Michael had always been clear about his intentions for his children. He once observed that his children don't choose to be the center of attention. I choose. His desire to shield them from exactly this kind of examination had driven every decision he made about their upbringing. But once he was gone, that protection disappeared with him, and Paris was left to navigate a world that had already decided it had questions she was obligated to answer. In 2003, during the documentary Living with Michael Jackson, he had stated publicly that he used his own sperm to father children via surrogacy. At the time, this seemed to settle the matter. It was a direct, unambiguous statement from the man himself, and most people accepted it and moved on. But Michael's death in 2009 changed the landscape entirely. Private matters became public property almost immediately, and the careful boundaries he had built around his family's personal history began to erode. Debbie Rowe, speaking to the British press, made a statement that shocked many people. She described herself as having been just a surrogate, and asserted that Michael's sperm had not been used in the conception of Paris and her brother. The admission was frank and unexpected, and it reignited the controversy in ways that reverberated far beyond the usual celebrity news cycle. The statement challenged not just the facts people thought they knew, but the entire narrative that had been carefully constructed and maintained for years. Into this newly reopened wound stepped several other voices. British actor Mark Lester, known for his role in the film Oliver, suggested publicly that he might have served as a biological donor, describing it as an act of friendship toward Michael during a time of need. His willingness to speak added another layer of complexity to an already complicated picture. And Dr. Arnold Klein, Michael's longtime dermatologist and professional supervisor Debbie Rowe, found himself at the center of intense public speculation about whether his close involvement with a family extended to a biological connection. The media's appetite for answers had never been satisfied, and now there were multiple unresolved threads being pulled in different directions simultaneously. The result was not clarity but confusion. A situation where the more people spoke, the harder the truth became to locate. The man behind the mystery circle. Dr. Arnold Klein occupied a unique and somewhat ambiguous position in the Jackson family story. He was more than Michael's dermatologist. He was a longtime confidant who had spent years embedded within Michael's inner circle. His clinic was where Debbie Rowe had worked, which meant the professional and personal lines in the story ran directly through him in ways that were difficult to untangle. Klein's appearances alongside Michael at medical appointments and social events over many years painted a picture of a man who was genuinely close to the family. When workers at his clinic confirmed that Debbie Rowe had received prenatal care there, the connection between Klein's medical practice and the children's origins became a subject of intense interest. Klein, for his part, publicly denied being the biological father, though the careful phrasing of his denials, "To the best of my knowledge, I am not the father of these children," left enough interpretive space for speculation to continue. In 2015, Klein posted a composite image on social media merging his face with that of Prince Jackson, accompanied by a single cryptic letter. The post went viral almost instantly, reigniting facial similarity debates and fueling interpretations of a paternal connection. Though he removed the image shortly afterward, it continued to circulate widely, adding yet another layer to an already multilayered public discussion. The deeper problem with all of the speculation was that the most important evidence, medical records, laboratory results, private correspondence, remained entirely inaccessible. Without that documentation, every claim and counterclaim existed in a space where nothing could be verified and nothing could be disproved. Klein's story illustrated how personal, professional, and family relationships could combine to create a mystery that was almost impossible to resolve through public conversation alone. The truth, whatever it was, had been locked away in places that no amount of media attention could reach. Paris's own perspective. Through all of this, Paris Jackson was not merely a passive subject of public debate. She was a person growing into her own identity while carrying the weight of a question that had followed her since birth. As she matured and found her own voice, she began speaking about her experience with a thoughtfulness that consistently cut through the noise surrounding her. Paris spoke frequently about her childhood as a period of genuine warmth and protection. She credited Michael with shielding her from the harsher judgments of the outside world, and she described lessons he taught her about kindness, about respect, about the value of treating others with dignity. That remained central to who she was. In her public statements, she consistently defined fatherhood not in biological terms, but in terms of presence, care, and emotional connection. Michael Jackson had been there. He had been the one who taught her, guided her, and loved her. That, in her view, was what made him her father. Her perspective resonated with a public increasingly open to broader, more nuanced understandings of family. Paris openly stated that family is about love and care, a position that felt less like a coping mechanism and more like a genuine philosophical stance shaped by lived experience. She was not dismissing biology. She was simply asserting that it was not the primary measure of what a father was. What was equally notable was Paris's approach to the mystery itself. Rather than being consumed by public speculation or pushed into premature disclosure by media pressure, she chose her own timeline. She waited until she was ready, until the decision to seek clarity was truly hers and not something imposed on her by external forces. That patience and deliberateness spoke to a quality of self-possession that was striking given everything she had grown up navigating. Her creative work during this period reflected the internal journey she was on. Through her music, she explored themes of identity, loss, and healing in ways that were clearly personal without being explicitly autobiographical. She transformed her experiences into art, using her platform not to perform pain but to process it, and in doing so, she built a connection with her audience that went beyond celebrity. The DNA test revelation. In early 2025, Paris Jackson made the decision that would finally bring decades of speculation to an end. She chose to publicly confirm the results of a DNA test, revealing that Michael Jackson was not her biological father. The announcement was significant not only for what it disclosed, but for the manner in which Paris chose to disclose it. Her tone throughout was calm, measured, and deeply grounded. There was no drama, no bitterness, no performance of shock or grief. She spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had already done the difficult internal work of coming to terms with a complicated truth, and who was now sharing it from a place of clarity rather than distress. This was not a revelation designed for maximum impact. It was a personal truth that she had decided the world no longer had the right to distort with its own invented versions. Paris was direct about her reasons for going public. The decision was made for herself, not for the media, not to silence critics, and not to satisfy public curiosity. She had wanted to know her own history, and once she knew it, she saw no reason to continue allowing speculation to fill the space that truth could occupy. The transparency of her communication created an immediate and powerful connection with people who recognized that her experienced something of their own. The difficult, sometimes painful work of understanding who you are when the answers don't come easily. Crucially, Paris was also clear about what the revelation did not change. Michael Jackson remained her father. He was a person who had raised her, taught her, protected her, and loved her. The DNA results confirmed the biological reality of her origins, but they did not alter the emotional and relational reality of her childhood. She recognized him as her father in the only sense that it ever truly mattered to her, and she said so plainly and without qualification. The public response was substantial. What had been one of the most persistent mysteries in entertainment became, almost overnight, a moment of collective reflection on what family actually means. The revelation opened genuine conversations about parenthood, about the limits of biology as a measure of love, and about the courage required to seek truth about oneself when the world has already decided what it believes. Paris had turned a moment that could easily have been divisive into something that brought people to a more honest reckoning with their own assumptions. Redefining legacy and identity. Paris Jackson's story does not end with a DNA result. It begins there, in a sense, begins a new chapter in which she no longer has to carry the unresolved weight of a question that was never truly hers to answer for the public in the first place. Her connection to Michael Jackson's legacy remains profound and unambiguous. She continues to honor him through her art, her advocacy, and the values he instilled in her. Tattoos, music, speeches, and public statements all bear witness to a relationship that was real regardless of biology, a relationship built over years of daily care, of teaching and learning, of shared experience and unconditional love. Legacy, in Paris's understanding, is not simply something inherited through blood. It is something actively maintained through choices, through the work of honoring what someone meant to you. Her story has also become something larger than her family's private history. Paris has used her platform to advocate for mental health awareness, to speak honestly about the pressures of growing up in the public eye, and to encourage others to live authentically without being consumed by what society expects them to be. Her message, that people have the right to know and tell their own stories, carries genuine weight precisely because she has lived through the alternative. Paris Jackson's revelation reshapes what it means to be a daughter, what it means to carry a famous name, and what it means to take ownership of an identity that has been defined by others for most of your life. Her journey is a study in resilience, not the kind that ignores difficulty, but the kind that moves through it with open eyes and arrives somewhere more honest on the other side. What Paris has ultimately offered the world is not just a resolution to a decades-long mystery. She has offered a different way of understanding what family is, a way that centers love, presence, and care above the accidents of genetics. Michael Jackson, whatever biological truth of their relationship, gave Paris a foundation that she carries with her every day. And Paris, in turn, has honored him by becoming exactly the kind of person that foundation was built to support. Clear-eyed, courageous, and unafraid to claim her own truth, the story of Paris Jackson is, in the end, a story about what endures. Biology fades into background. Love, and the legacy of love, does not.